नंदन प्रजजन रंजन यशोदनंदन प्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शील प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परमदक्ष अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमती स्वयं श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। ISKCON संस्थापक जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परमदक्ष अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद श्री गौर किशोर दास बाबा महाराज की जय। विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव साधुओं श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबा महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुना श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास अग्नाशत गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य हरदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद अद्वैत दादर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिका श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्र वे सुदर्शन भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगामयी की जय। यमुनामयी की जय। भक्त देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। ISKCON वर्तमान गुरुवंत की समाज भक्तवृंद की जय। कौरव प्रेमानंद Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled. It is all glories to the assembled. It is all glories to the assembled. It is all glories to Shikura and Shikauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So I would like to welcome you all for this Tuesday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 15, Text 12 and 13. So first we will read Text 12. Brahmo Vacha Manasa me sutai युष्मत् पूर्वजाः सनकादयः चैरुर्विहायसा लोकाल लोकेषु विगतस्पृहाः। Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Lord Brahma said, my four sons Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana and Sanat Kumara, who are drawn from my mind, are your predecessors. Sometimes they travel throughout the material and spiritual skies without any definite desire. When we speak of desire, we refer to desire for material sense gratification. Saintly persons like Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumara have no material desire, but sometimes they travel all over the universe out of their own accord to preach devotional service. Text 13. Taye kada bhagavatho vaikuntasya malatmanaha yayur vaikunta nilayham sarvaloka namaskritam taye kada bhagavatho vaikuntasya malatmanaha yayur vaikunta nilayam sarvaloka namaskritam taye kada bhagavato vaikuntasya malatmanaha yayur vaikunta nilayam sarvaloka namaskritam. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. After this, traveling all over the universes, they also entered into the spiritual sky, for they were free from all material contamination. In the spiritual sky, there are spiritual planets known as Vaikunthas, which are the residences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His pure devotees, and are worshipped by the residents of all the material planets. The material world is full of cares and anxieties. In any one of the planets, beginning from the highest down to the lowest, Patala, every living creature must be full of cares and anxieties, because in the material planets, one cannot live eternally. The living entities, however, are actually eternal. They want an eternal home, an eternal residence, but because of accepting a temporary abode in the material world, they are naturally full of anxiety. In the spiritual sky, the planets are called Vaikuntha because the residents of these planets are free from all anxieties. For them, there is no question of birth, death, old age, and diseases, and therefore they are not anxious. On the other hand, the residents of the material planets are always afraid of birth, death, disease, and old age, and therefore they are full of anxieties. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupada Mahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Udapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganarvinatanvitam Tam Sjeevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganalalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpade Bhupesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Raptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kapasandubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Ananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktakanda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Moham Karvadi Vachalam Pangam Nande Digrim Kapatama Mande Shiguram Dhirathanam Paramandamadam Shri Chaitanya Vishwaram. Hare Krishna. So, in the first verse that I read, it mentions how the four Kumaras, they were born from Brahma's mind, and they traveled through all the material and spiritual skies without any definite desire. So the Kumara were born from Lord Brahma's mind. Brahma does not have to engage in union with the opposite sex to create. He can create even from his mind. So that is how the four Kumaras were created. And these four Kumaras, actually in the purport, we see that they travel to all the places to preach devotional service to the Supreme Lord. That is all is their mission. Because this is out of their compassion. Now, let us understand something, what this compassion is. The definition that is given is that a person who is unable to bear another's distress is called compassionate. That means when somebody is suffering and a person understands, yes, he is suffering, that is when it is called a compassionate nature. A devotee understands the compassionate, being compassionate, he understands the problem of the materialistic people. So that is how the those in the higher planetary systems like the Kumaras, all of them, they have a compassionate nature. And they always wonder how to deliver these living entities in the material world who are suffering. So it is mentioned that one time, even before Advaita Acharya appeared or prayed for the descent of the Lord to this material world, Lord Shiva, he traveled all over the world. And today is Shivratri, so I thought I'll connect this pastime also. Lord Shiva traveled all around and he was deeply concerned seeing the condition of the living entities, how much they are suffering. And he was thinking, how can I deliver these conditioned living entities? So after a long discussion with Yogamaya, he concluded that only the Supreme Lord can deliver the fallen souls. So he went to the shore of causal ocean and he meditated on the Supreme Lord for about 700 years. And being pleased with his austerities, Lord Narayana appeared before him and Lord Shiva offered many prayers. And thereafter, the Lord entered into the body of Lord Shiva and then they became Advaita Acharya. Therefore, then Advaita Acharya prayed with Ganga water and Tulasi leaves, requesting the Lord to appear, and the Lord appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is a small pastime given as to how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this material world to preach the Sankirtana movement. So devotees are by nature, they are very compassionate. They see the other living entity suffering and they always think how to make this living entity free from this suffering. Of course, the living entities don't think that they are suffering, they think that they are enjoying. See, another very nice example in the Mahabharata is Vidura. Vidura, throughout, if you look at the pastime, he exhibited his compassionate nature to the Pandavas. He saved them not from one occasion, but from many occasions. What to talk about the Pandavas, even to Duryodhana, he was very compassionate. He was the well-wisher of Dhritarashtra actually. Vidura was in fact thrown out of his house, and though he was a well-wisher of Dhritarashtra. And it is mentioned that as to how he was always thinking of his well-being of Dhritarashtra in his heart. And it is mentioned, whereas Dhritarashtra stayed in the house of the Pandavas, though he was the cause for all whatever happened, but still he stayed in the house of the Pandavas after all his sons died. So Vaishnavas don't make enemies, they are always forgiving by nature and they are compassionate. Another very nice example is Srila Vyasadeva and his many disciples. Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam out of compassion for the living entities. They were in fact concerned on how to benefit others. The Lord himself, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Janma Sartaka Kari Kara Para Upakar. One who has taken birth as a human being in the land of India should make his life successful and work for the benefit of all the other people. This is a quote from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 941. So this is the quote from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who says that anyone who has taken birth in the land of India, Bharatvarsha, as a human being, must see and work for the benefit of others and also make his own life successful. How this is possible? By preaching the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is said that one time during Srila Prabhupada's stay in this world, that is when he was preaching the Krishna consciousness and he brought many Westerners. Somehow, some other reason, many of them were put behind bars by the police. They were suspecting that who are they and all these things. During the earlier days, everyone was looking at this Kirtan, road Nagar Kirtan as a disturbance. Somehow or the other, many devotees were put behind the bars. But the devotees, they were not even worried, oh, they were put behind the bars. They were blissfully chanting and discussing Krishna Katha. Whereas those devotees who were outside, they were very anxious at that time that what will happen to the devotees who are inside. But what was more important was that when the devotees were freed, the inmates who were there in the jail, they were very, very disappointed because the devotees preached to them Krishna consciousness. And after they left, there was no one to preach. So that is how devotees are also anxious, but for a higher cause. So the Kumaras actually travel all around the material and spiritual world. It is mentioned without any desire. But generally, when we talk about desire, we understand only desire for sense gratification. because our understanding is limited to only sense gratification, unless and we have taken up the process of Krishna consciousness. So because of our innumerable desires that is lodged within the heart of the conditioned living entity, everyone is addicted to material sense gratification. Now, desiring is a living symptom. One cannot be without desires. This is the symptom of every living entity. But what desire should be kept, that is up to the living entity. The Lord does not force, but the Lord gives a path. Whereas the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 70, he says a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, not the man who strives to satisfy his desires. So the sloka actually has got a very deep meaning. When the desires keep on flowing, and it says incessant flow of desires that enter into the ocean, that is ever being filled and what is, but is always still. So desires keep flowing into our heart just as water goes into the ocean. But what happens is that they create disturbances in the ocean. But here it says that the desires will keep on coming, but who achieves peace? One who is steady and still, not who tries to satisfy the desire. One who tries to satisfy the desire, he can never fulfill the desire, because the desires, even before you fulfill one, there will be a lineup of 5 desires or 10 desires. So one can never fulfill the desires in this material world. So the living entities are provided the freedom of choice. Lord shows the path. Yes, this is what you do through Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. But the Lord does not interfere with anyone's independence. One nice example given in Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, is that Daksha, in his previous life, had performed a lot of austerities to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a lot of material desires. So in that life as Daksha, it is mentioned that the Lord gave him unlimited potency to fulfill his sexual desires. So this also will happen. So if you have material desires as well as a little bit of spiritual desires, then the Lord will fulfill both of them. But what will happen is you can't put 2 legs in 2 different boats and swim across the ocean. It is what to talk about crossing the ocean. You can't cross even a small bank. So the living entity's position or a jiva's position is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 29th chapter, as how he is just like a dog who, overcome with hunger, goes from door to door for some food. You see many times in the streets, so many street dogs are there. They are just waiting who will throw some food. And sometimes they may go from door to door and try to get some food, or they might bark or make some noise. And then this sloka mentions, according to his destiny, he sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and other times receives a little food to eat. So sometimes somebody has got some excess food, they may call the dog by its name and throw it out. And sometimes when nobody is there and the dog keeps barking, they might even drive the dog or even throw some stones at the dog. And similarly, it is mentioned that the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different species of life according to destiny. So we wander in so many different species of life because of our desires, nothing else. And then it says that sometimes he is high and sometimes he is low. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to the hellish planets, and sometimes to the middle planets, and so on. So one universe has got so many planets in its system, upper planets, middle planets, the lower planets. For example, in this universe itself, we have the upper planetary systems where heavenly beings stay. Then in the earthly planets, we are there. And the lower planets is inhabited by lower level of species of life. So actually, if you look at, we should be having only one desire, that is work on the spiritual activities for the Supreme Lord. But because of the power of illusion, we tend to satisfy our senses. And the more we tend to have material desires, the more we get entangled. And then it's becoming so entangling that many times, even when people perform religious activities, first of all, the general common man does not know what is religion, which is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. But the common man generally thinks, if I have to practice some religion, it is only for obtaining some economic benefit. That's all. How can I get something by practicing religion? But Srimad Bhagavatam completely defies this. Pure devotional service is free from all material desires. But it also says in the first canto, second chapter, Kamasya nendriya prite labho jiveta yavata jivasya tatnya jignasa nato yas cheha karma bihi. Life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's life. That means the human species of life is given only to inquire what is the purpose of this life. Now, as I mentioned, there are higher level of species in the heavenly planets, and the lower planets are inhabited by ghosts, spirits, and the lower species of life. Now, the lower species of life, they don't have that intelligence to ask what is the purpose of life. And the higher species, like the demigods and so many different species in the higher planetary system, which we'll come to, they don't have the time because they have got so much of opulence and these things that they're very busy. But human form of life is so important, so valuable, that one can ask a question, Jivasya Tattva Jignasa, what is the purpose of this goal of life? This is possible only in the human form of life. This is what Srila Prabhupada is often quoted in his lectures and also mentioned. And the whole civilization, if you see, they are misdirected because of these material expectations. And as long as material expectations are there and are being fulfilled, relationships exist. And the moment the expectations are there, but the results don't come, relationships don't exist at all, which we see. People don't even want to practice. Once they practice some so-called religious activities, they may get some money, they may get some opulence. But as soon as they get it, then they forget the Lord, they forget the religion, everything they forget. They don't realize that one time they were in difficulties, but Lord wanted to give them some mercy. So the Lord gave, then they forgot the Lord also. This is how the material world is. It is said that one time when Srila Prabhupada was in Los Angeles, morning he used to go for a walk with many devotees. So many devotees asked a lot of questions and all things, but there is one devotee who didn't ask a question. He had in his heart, but he didn't ask. But he kept quiet. When Srila Prabhupada was entering his car, he just came very close to the door so that Srila Prabhupada couldn't close the door. And then this particular devotee who didn't ask any question, he put his head between the door and Srila Prabhupada. He asked Srila Prabhupada, what is required to become Krishna consciousness? Srila Prabhupada didn't say you hear, you chant. He said desire. That means if you have a desire to become Krishna consciousness, then the Lord will make arrangement for you to become Krishna consciousness and become free from the cycle of birth and death. And therefore, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami tells Parikshit Maharaj in Sloka 2.3.10, Akama sarva kamova moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajata purusham param. A person who has a broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desires or without any material desire or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. That means whether somebody has got material desires or does not have a material desire at all, or he might be desiring even liberation, because many times people get so much fed up in the material world that they want to be liberated, they want to become free from this material world, somehow or the other. That is the type of suffering they go through. But irrespective of whatever it is, whoever wants anything, even up to the point of liberation, it says that one must worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. Why? Because by worshipping the personality of Godhead, even with some desires, the Lord cleanses the desire that is there within our heart. Because the Lord is there as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and the Lord cleanses. But that also, when one understands, there is a point where one will understand, yes, Now, Srimad Bhagavatam says that one should not have any material desires. One should satisfy the Lord without any material desires, whereas the devotional service should be uninterrupted and unmotivated. Even after hearing this, many may not completely reach that stage. They may have little desires in the heart, but the Lord, one who is very sincere, the Lord arranges to clean his heart also. But one who has 90% of material desire and 5% of spiritual desire, he may not last in that spiritual activities for a long time. So that is why all these scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam are given by compassionate souls like Sri Vyasadeva. If you look at Mahabharata or the Bhagavad Gita itself, it starts with Arjuna refusing to fight. Why Arjuna did not want to fight? Because he did not want to kill his friends, relatives, and all of them who were on the opposite side. It was for his own satisfaction. But later, when he heard Bhagavad Gita and the Lord gave him instructions, he was prepared to fight for satisfying Krishna's senses or Krishna's desires. So he realized that Krishna's satisfaction is more important than his own satisfaction. That is how he agreed to fight. Now we come to text 13. So text 13 mentions how these Kumaras, they were free from all material contamination and they traveled to the Vaikunthas, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, that is the Vaikunthas are the residences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, and are worshipped by the residents of all the other material planets. So there is the spiritual creation, the spiritual, this thing, there is no creation at all. But material world, there is a creation, there is a maintenance, and there is an annihilation. So in the spiritual sky also, there are innumerable number of spiritual planets, and they are all known as Vaikunthas. In the last class, I mentioned that Vaikuntha means free from anxieties, whereas material world is called Kunta, which is full of anxiety. This is what is mentioned in the purport and the purport. So the purport mentioned that material world is full of cares and anxieties. And if you look at our whole day's activities, right from morning till the time we go to the bed, unless and until, like I said, if you have taken up to Krishna consciousness, is filled with activities only which gives room for cares and anxieties. Care and anxiety. Care because we always think that I have to care for this, I have to care for that, I have to do this, I have to do that. So many things which what happens with that is we become anxious. And these anxieties are something which is very harmful for our material body. But whereas in the spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, now, of course, the spiritual sky also, there are other planets like Goloka Vrindavan, Ayodhya, and so forth. And then, but in general, they are all called Vaikunthas because they are free from cares and anxieties. There is no anxiety in the spiritual world. And there is nothing like care also, because there is only one motive in the spiritual, that is to serve the Supreme Lord and please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We see as to how when Srila Prabhupada has mentioned the purport, that the Supreme Lord as well as its residents are worshipped by the planets of the material, are worshipped by the residents of all the material planets. Now, of course, if you ask today, some might worship sun, some might worship moon, some might worship Indra, like some might worship other demigods. But as per the Shastras, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be worshipped. And of course, the Lord says that one who worships my devotee automatically worships me. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead and its residents are all worshipped by the various planets in the material world. Like Indra, even the demigods, they offer worship to the Supreme Lord. They know that the Supreme Lord is worshipable, and also the residents of the Vaikuntha planets are worshipable. But the thing is, they are so opulent and so engaged in the material activity that they hardly have time to think. So that is why it is said that the demigods are also in that precarious situation where they are not able to perform devotional service to the Lord. And that is how they are also, many times the demigods also fall from their position. These are all posts. The posts of demigods, the positions of demigods are just like posts. So coming back to the point, material world is full of cares and anxieties. And there are many reasons for that. We'll go through some of these reasons. One is attachment. For example, people might be engrossed in many sports like cricket or any other sports. And when these activities take place, there's a lot of thrill for some time. And they will be thinking, oh, today this team will win, tomorrow that team will win. So those who are thinking that this team will win, or even the other team, they will be those who are interested in the other team, they will be thinking, what if my team loses? What if the team that I think should win starts losing? So they are all into that type of anxiety. So it is said that attachment to anything material, or whether it is someone or maybe any material activities, leads to anxieties. And the more we become attached, the more we are driven to anxiety. And this goes on right from the time we take birth in this material world all the way up to the point that we leave this body. Our body is, this thing is full of, mind is full of anxiety. Because why people think that only sense enjoyment is the only means to get happiness. Now, for example, anxiety can also come, for example, people might have a lot of savings, but the more savings they have, the more they are worried, because they might think tomorrow income tax people might come and raid the house, or somebody might steal from my accounts from online. These days is a very common thing, online fraud. So what will happen if they take money from my account without my knowledge? So these are all things that people have attachment to. The next reason that is given is uncertainty. Uncertainty is one cause of anxiety. For example, we want to catch a flight, and all of a sudden, we might find that on way to the travel, there might be some accident in the road, which might cause a roadblock. So that causes anxiety. Oh, what will happen if I miss the flight? I have an urgent meeting to attend. So these are all things that come in our day-to-day life. The next point that is mentioned is fear. We all have so many different types of fear. Definitely because the material world has been created to create that in our listing. So these various aspects which I mentioned, they create a lot of anxiety in our mind. And what happens is that there are many, many extreme cases where anxiety leads to depression also. Many people get depressed because they can't tolerate this anxiety for long periods and long time. Whereas one who has taken up to the Krishna consciousness or a devotee of the Lord, he does not become a victim of any of these things. Now he knows, yes, whatever Lord has given me, the Lord wants to take it, we'll take it away. That's all. And if I have to board a flight, if I missed a flight, that is also the Lord's arrangement. So, and the real devotee is never fearful. That is why I think, I don't know whether I remember whether I quoted this verse. This is from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Queen Kunti prays to the Lord. O Lord of the universe, soul of the universe, O personality of the form of the universe, please therefore sever my tie of affection for my kinsmen, the Pandavas and the Vrishnis. So she's asking, or rather praying to the Lord, so that the Lord may cut off her attachment to whether the Pandavas or Vrishnis, whoever it is. So this is how a devotee always thinks, that I should not have any attachment, I should not have any, devotees are free from uncertainty also. And of course, devotees are not fearful of death also. One time, a disciple asked Srila Prabhupada that in the material world, we have experienced so many anxieties. But even after taking to the process of Krishna consciousness, we have a lot of anxiety, what to do. Srila Prabhupada asked, what is the type of anxiety? Because he wanted to know what is that anxiety devotees are feeling. So they said that, no, we have to see that we have to dress the deities properly in time. The curtains are open in time. Of course, many places devotees may not be very concerned about it, but one should offer the services to the Supreme Lord on proper times in the proper way. So devotees who are really working to serve the Lord, to please the Lord, they know and they are anxious. So Srila Prabhupada said that if you are anxious to serve Krishna, that is good. It's a transcendental anxiety. So that means that if you have a transcendental anxiety, that is okay, but not material anxiety. Another example that is given is when Vasudeva, when Lord appeared as Krishna, when he was a small baby, Vasudeva actually was at that time in the prison. So we all know that the prison doors were opened and he carried baby Krishna to the Yamuna river and he crossed the river. So the Lord jumped at that time from the basket into the waters of Yamuna. And this was purposefully done by the Lord to increase the anxiety of Vasudeva. Because parent, child. So Vasudeva had that anxiety to save that child. So similarly, it is said that we must have the desire to serve the Lord, to please the Lord, not for our sense gratification, but to please the Lord by doing our services properly on time, doing quality services and all those things. So generally it is said that devotees don't have any material desires. So they are much more peaceful than any other normal materialistic karmi people, which is true. When one comes to the process of Krishna consciousness, he feels a lot of change in his life. And one of that is this: anxieties don't happen at all. And of course, they don't care for what happens in the material world. So anxiety in spiritual aspects is a good experience. That is because it is for a higher purpose, to please Krishna, not for our own sense gratification. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a statement that love for Krishna is like hot sugarcane juice. It is delicious, so you can't ignore it. It is so hot that it causes burning also. So devotional service is something that is very delicious, but sometimes it burns also. We feel that burning. And another example that is given in the Nectar of Devotion is the gopis. The gopis, when they were united with Krishna, it was sweet like nectar for them. And when they were separated from Krishna, it was another agony for them. But that is also nectar, because they were absorbed in Krishna. That is why that anxiety was also good. So performing devotional service also involves anxiety, but it is on a higher platform that it leads for love to Krishna. Then there is a mention about how the Vaikuntha planets are so illuminous. What to talk every day, there is mention about how there is one sun in the whole universe. Yeah, the scientists give so many theories. There are so many suns and all those things. But here there is mentioned that yes, there is only one sun in one universe, and the Supreme Lord is the supreme enjoyer, is a supreme proprietor, and everyone is meant to worship that Supreme Lord only. Now, we had one point that how the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets, that is the Lord and the residents, are worshipped by the living entities in the other material world. There is a quote in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 6th chapter. It says the demigods qualified by super excellent quality of goodness are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature and the mode of passion, live on earth with their subordinates. So even the demigods who are there on the higher planets, they also by constitution are supposed to be worshipping the Supreme Lord and the residents there, because the inhabitants of spiritual world are definitely on a much higher platform than those who are situated in the material world. And there's another quote which says that materialistic persons attracted by sense gratification and devoted to forefathers and demigods by executing different sacrifices can go to the moon planet, but they again return to this planet. So there are, like I mentioned, there are people who worship the moon, the sun, but the sun and the moon also worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which we understand from Brahma Samhita, where Lord Brahma says, forgot the sloka, I think I got it somewhere. I think I forgot. Now, Krishna tells, there are some who worship those in the Pitraloka and all those things. For that also there is a quote that materialistic persons are allowed to go to Pitraloka and come back again to this planet and take birth in their own families, beginning the same fruitive activity. That means many times people perform so many activities which may be there in the scriptures, but they don't have a proper understanding. So one who performs a lot of materialistic activities, he can go to the moon planet. But Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Aap Brahma Bhuvana Loka. Yes, that verse is quoted here in the purport. Aap Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. From the highest planet in the material world to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. One who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never take birth again. So whether you are there in the sun, or whether you go to the moon, or whether you go to Patal Loka, in the lower species of life, the living entities are going through a cycle of birth and death within this planetary system, that's all. But one who attains to this Vaikuntha planet, they become free from the cycle of this birth, death, old age and disease. In the Mahabharata, there is a nice this thing where Yaksha asks Yudhishthira Maharaj 4 questions. But I put one question that is relevant to today's subject, where Yaksha asks, what is the condition of this material world? To which Yudhishthira Maharaj replied that this material world is like a frying pan. You know what is a frying pan? Matajis know very well, and they will explain also. It's something that is to be cooked. We put some oil or water or whatever it is and put the ingredients to boil in that frying pan. So Yudhishthira Maharaj replies that this material world is like a frying pan, where the sun is like fire. Now, in the frying pan, if you need something to heat. So we have gas or oven or whatever it may be. So the material world is like a frying pan where the sun is like fire. Then the days and nights are like fuel. I mean, I think the last class I mentioned about the time, how time kills. So the days and nights are like fuel. What fuel does is that fuel adds fire. And the passing seasons are the stirring spoons. I mean, when we put something in the frying pan, we need oil, we need fire, we need a spoon also to stir. So the passing seasons are the stirring spoon, and time is the cook who is frying all the creatures in the pan. So we are like that. We are put into the pan, and we don't know that we are being fried or deep fried, whatever it may be. But the time is cooking us. Time is killing us, which I mentioned in the last chapter. So I like this quote very much. I'll repeat it again. This material world is like a frying pan where the sun is like fire. The days and nights are like fuel. The passing seasons are the stirring spoon. And time is the cook who is frying all the creatures in the pan. So we are all like living entities being fried by time and in this material world. And the sun, the time, in the form of days and nights are frying spoons and fire and all those things. And we don't know that we are actually being fried. Only thing is that when we come to the human form of life, we can understand many things by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. Now, for example, in one of the places there is a quote, how a very envious person who is very, very envious out of everyone. You know, envy is something very, very common when we go to relate with people in the material world. We see how they are envious. Whereas in the Shastras it is mentioned that when someone becomes envious, he becomes a source of misery for everyone. Which is true. When we meet somebody who is very envious, he causes a lot of misery to us. And to such a person, he takes birth as a snake in the same house to protect the house. In the sense that when a person is very, very envious, the Lord makes arrangements to take birth for him as a snake in the next birth in the same house, because then he can protect the house. So many times we see snakes come. Why? Because this is the reason. The snake was there as a previous house, and this is what is a quote from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada can never be wrong. Similarly, it is said that the ant thinks that it is eating sugar, but it can run after sugar for a very short time. Now the mosquito thinks that it is sucking the blood of somebody. It is giving trouble to the person whose blood it is sucking. But then one small this thing comes, what do you call thunder? Not even a thunderstorm. Light drizzle comes. That's all. The mosquitoes are finished. The ants are finished, and all these small creatures are finished. So like that, our life also comes to an end in no time at all. But we think that we are enjoying. Similarly, all the living entities this world, they're all thinking that they are enjoying, but actually they're suffering, which they don't know. But in the human form of life, it is possible to understand that material life is nothing but suffering. Whereas in the spiritual world, there is no birth, there is no death, there is no old age, and there is no disease. Whereas in the material world, there is birth, there is death, there is old age, there is disease. And Srimad Bhagavatam, which we'll be coming to in some time, mentions about how birth is very, very painful. It is mentioned that a child, before he is born out of his womb, there are so many living entities in the womb of the mother but unfortunately the child is helpless. And similarly, when he comes out also, he's going through a lot of pain, but he's unable to express that pain because he doesn't have that capability to understand or express. And after he comes into this material world also, he goes through a lot of pain in terms of the activities that take place in the material world. So birth is also very, very painful. And actually it is mentioned that there is no time, so we'll go into detail some other time. But I'll just mention how at the time of death, a person is not able to express the pain or anguish that he is going through before leaving the body. He says that if somebody has been very, very sinful or highly materialistic, he goes through a lot of anguish. He goes through old age and he goes through diseases and all those things. Every day there is a new disease coming up. Not every day, at least every couple of months, there is a new disease. Like we got corona, then we got Omicron. So many forms of this corona are there that new diseases have come. And yesterday I was talking to somebody, so many people have become weak. If you ask me, even including me, I was a victim of this corona at least twice in the last couple of months. It has put down my health very badly. So only when you go through these situations, we can understand, yes, life is a struggle. Material world is a struggle. Whereas in the spiritual world, there is no birth, there is no death, there is no old age, and there is no disease. They don't go through old age. They are all eternally young. So, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we have got this opportunity to understand, yes, that life in this material world is a big, big struggle. And it's not that we must understand, we must apply it in our life also. Before I conclude the class, there's a nice quote I took from the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Brahma is telling, Lord Brahma is telling, I, that is Brahma, Lord Shiva, all of you demigods, the demons, the living entities, born of perspiration, the living beings born of eggs, the trees, plants, those living entities that are born from embryos, all come from the Supreme Lord, from his incarnation as Rajoguna. That is, Lord Brahma is the Guna Avatara for this, who are part of me. Let us therefore go to the Supreme Lord and take shelter of his lotus feet. So irrespective of whatever birth one is in, whether one is a demigod, or one is in the human form of life, or one is a lower species of life, they all have only one shelter, that is the Supreme Lord. And everybody must take shelter of that lotus feet of that Supreme Lord and nothing else. No one else can help. No one else can give anything. Now, why they have this fear and anxiety and all these things? Because the spirit soul within us is eternal by nature. The spirit soul does not have birth, it does not have death, it does not have old age, it does not have disease. The only disease that it has got is that having accepted this material body, it is facing, but the soul does not face, it is the body that is facing all these things. So that is why we are all always full of anxiety. Whereas the body, that is spirit soul, that is spiritual in nature, which does not have birth, death, old age, and disease. So spiritual worlds have uh, spiritual bodies which are not having a material contamination. That's why if we see that the Kumaras, they could travel all around the material and spiritual worlds. Now, when they are in the spiritual world, they go in the spiritual body. And when they are in the material world, for some purpose or anything, they come for a higher purpose. They may come with a material body, but they are spiritual in nature. So, but even though we are spiritual in nature, we are covered by this Maya. Whereas self-realized souls or pure devotees of the Lord, even when they are in this material world, they know that they are not this body. And they realize that platform. So they remain in that platform. So they are free from the cycle of birth and death, even though they may be appearing in this material world for a higher purpose. Whereas in the spiritual world, everything is conscious, everything is free from birth, death, old age, and disease. Of course, some more slokas are coming up, which will explain, we will explain in the next few weeks in detail how everything is conscious. But before I conclude, I thought there is one particular quote which I saw in the Mahabharata, which I liked, not Mahabharata, in the Ramayana. Vishwamitra was a great saint, and he came to see King Dasaratha. And when he came, he asked, Aihishtam yat yat punat janma jayaya. That means, is everything going well in your endeavor to conquer the repetition of birth and death? That means he didn't ask, how are you? How is your family? How are your children? He asked, is everything going well in your endeavor to conquer the repetition of birth and death? That is the way in the earlier days the sages used to ask questions. Whereas now when we meet, we might ask, how are you? How is your wife? How are your children? And all those things. But in the earlier days, sages used to ask, are we conquering the cycle of birth and death? So this is how the system was. But somehow as Kali Yuga is progressing, things have got degraded. And we are more interested into the temporary things rather than permanent matters. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. Somebody has got any questions, comments, they can ask for the next couple of minutes. Any questions, comments on today's class from anybody?
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the wonderful class.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji.
I like that this one about the frying pan. Even I like that.
About the
frying pan.
Frying pan. Okay. This is a quote from Mahabharata.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes. So, can you just summarize the two shlokas which we read now,
yes,
the crux of it,
Yes, Mataji. I think, I'm sorry, I should have done it even without you asking. I will try and do it from the next class onwards. The summary of the first shloka is that the four Kumaras, they traveled all around the material and the spiritual world without any definite desire. Means they don't have a desire for sense gratification, but they travel out of compassion for all the living entities like us who are conditioned in this material world. Of course, I don't say that we are conditioned. I don't say that we are fully liberated also. So to preach Krishna consciousness, the ignorant living entities, they travel all around, and that is their only desire. They don't have any material desire, like the great sages. And the next verse, that is Sloka 13, mentions about the demigods, when they were in trouble, they were praying to Brahma. And in answer to that, Brahma is replying them from this verse onwards. That yes, the Kumaras travel from this place to this place, and they reach the Vaikuntha planets, which are worshipped by the residents of the lower planets or the planets in the material world. And then the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that this material world is full of cares and anxieties. And the purport mentions about the difference in the material and the spiritual world. And we will understand and read from the next few slokas what is the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. which I will not go into detail now because we are going to hear. But in a summary, it starts by Brahma telling that this material world is full of cares and anxieties. Because in the spiritual world, there is no birth, death, old age, and disease. Whereas in the material world, there is birth, death, old age, and disease, which causes these cares and anxieties. Was I able to clear your doubt, Mataji, or sum up your expectation?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
So, Prabhu, like in the lower planets, like do they also have a chance to come up to the higher planets?
Yes, Mataji, they also come up, but then they come up with a lot of suffering. In the lower planets, the sufferings are very, very plenty. For example, the ghosts and spirits, it is said, Patal Loka, places and all those places, it's full of suffering that they don't have even time to think. There are so much of suffering. But Lord is very, very merciful.
But there is, I heard that there is enjoyment also more there, Prabhu.
I mentioned that we also think that we are enjoying, isn't it? Don't you think we are trying to enjoy? Like that, they think, I gave the example of mosquito. Mosquito sucks the blood of a human being. He thinks that he's enjoying, but he doesn't know that his life is coming to an end in no time. For them, one day maybe, that's all. So like that, every living entity in all the 14 planetary system thinks that they are enjoying. But it is an illusion.
Right.
But Lord, being very compassionate and very merciful, gives opportunity for everyone. In fact, there are slokas where Bhaktivinoda Thakura has quoted in one of his prayers that let me be born as even an insect in a devotee's house. That means that is an opportunity given for a lower species of life, because in the association of devotees, that insect may be delivered.
Okay.
Yes,
so probably like even in the lower planets, there will be devotees going and trying to preach?
Yes, Mataji. Yes.
Okay. So, okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Lord and his devotees are always very, very merciful and compassionate. But we should not think that, okay, let me become a creature tomorrow in this lower planetary system. At that time, I'll see somebody will come and preach. We may be under so much of illusion, we don't know. So when the opportunity comes, if you get a lottery for 10 crores, will you not take it? Like that, this human form of life is like a lottery to us. So we should make the best use out of it. That is what we must understand, and we must apply also in our life, Mataji. Thank you for asking a very nice question, Mataji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Anybody else, any other questions or comments? If there is nothing, can I take the class as bound up? Shall I bound up the class, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
If there are no doubts, we can wind up.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.